Missing person cases are complex and heartbreaking, with so many ins and outs and factors to consider. These cases may take decades to solve. But what about cases of people who don't even know they're missing? Number 5. On October 30th, 2013, 37-year-old David Amaya made the trip from his home in Monterrey, Mexico, to the shared border with the USA. David knew little about his childhood apart from the fact that he'd been born in Chicago, and therefore had US citizenship. However, when he arrived at the border, Border Patrol guards in San Diego didn't believe him and detained him for attempting to cross illegally. David was detained by Border Control as they launched an investigation to see if he was telling the truth about being born in Chicago. After searching through records and databases, they made a chilling discovery. David Amaya had been born in Chicago, Illinois, and had been missing for 30 years. After verifying his citizenship status, they called David's mother, Kathy, who hadn't seen her son in more than 3 decades, to give her the good news. She told WEAU News, quote, "The Border Patrol in San Diego called me and told me that they had someone detained that was crossing the border, and he said his name was David Amaya." The two finally met during an emotional reunion, and Kathy was finally able to tell David the truth. In 1979, when David was 7 years old, he was kidnapped by his father, who took him to Mexico to be raised by his grandparents. David had grown up only speaking Spanish and was told that his mother had abandoned him in Mexico and run away to the United States. Kathy Amaya told the news outlet, quote, "I went on to file a report and they said they couldn't do anything because he was in Mexico." She told David that there hadn't been a day that she hadn't thought about him and had never stopped searching for him. David is now spending time reconnecting with his family in the USA and coming to terms with the fact that he was missing for over 30 years. Number 4. In 2013, German-born Angela Palmer received a friend request from a woman named Helga Semecki, whose location was listed as being from Croatia. At first, Angela brushed it off, thinking that someone had added her by mistake and thinking that she was someone else. That was until Helga sent her a message in German asking about her childhood. Angela responded to the message and quickly learned that Helga was her biological mother. At first, Angela didn't believe her and thought it was a cruel prank. However, Helga sent over a copy of Angela's birth certificate and old family photos, which confirmed that she was her mother. Angela, who was 44 at the time, had lived her whole life believing that her mother had abandoned her in an orphanage in Germany in the 1960s. At least that's what Angela's father told her. He also told her that when he found out, he picked her up and raised her on his own. Angela's father purported to be a traveling salesman and moved the pair all around Europe. At the time, Angela didn't suspect that anything was wrong. However, after learning the truth, she put 2 and 2 together. Helga explained to Angela that she hadn't abandoned her at an orphanage all those years ago. Instead, Angela's father had kidnapped her and fled the country. In a Yahoo.com article, Angela said, quote, "She said my father was wanted in Germany for kidnapping and domestic violence, but he avoided the police by constantly moving us to new places. Apparently, my paternal grandfather had kept my mother informed of my whereabouts during the years. She was in contact with my father, but each time he received a court summons, we moved again. I still don't understand how he managed to escape the law so many times." A fundraising campaign was set up to help the pair reunite, as Helga was now living in Croatia and Angela in California. The pair met for the first time via Skype, with Angela saying, quote, "I have an amazing gift that I didn't have last year, and I hope my story will encourage others to keep looking for lost family members. My story could happen to anyone." Number 3. When Sun Bin was just 4 years old in 1991, he was taken from the market stall that his parents owned and sold vegetables in the Sichuan province of China. He'd been kidnapped by a group who stole children and sold them to families who were willing to pay high prices to start a family of their own. In Sun's case, his adopted family paid $250 for him. as boys are highly regarded within Chinese society, as they can carry on the family lineage. Sun had grown up in the Jiangsu province, over 1,200 miles away from where he'd been kidnapped. He grew up with a strange feeling, a feeling that he'd been adopted, but he didn't ask his parents how he'd ended up with them, and had no idea that he was actually a missing person. As he grew older, that feeling grew stronger and stronger, and he longed to know more about who his real family was. He told the Daily Mail, quote, "I admit I grew to love them for their kindness as years went by, but I knew that I had to try to find my real parents. When I was old enough to start to look for my real parents on my own, I didn't tell them at first because I didn't want to upset them." While Sun was growing up in Jiangsu, his father, Ku Bin, and his mother, Lo Bin, never gave up looking for their beloved son. They traveled around China, handing out leaflets and putting up posters appealing for information about their missing son. Then in 2014, Sun received incredible news. Sun had recently learned about a government-backed scheme to help kidnapped children reunite with their biological parents. Sun submitted a DNA sample to the scheme in 2010, and years later they found a match. Sadly, Lo Bin had passed away in 2011, following a battle with cancer. Ku Bin received a call from the local police informing him that they'd located his missing son, and on January 12, 2015, Ku Bin and Sun Bin were reunited for the first time in 24 years. According to a CNN article, when the pair were reunited, Ku Bin dropped to the floor and cried, embracing his son and making up for lost time. Sun Bin told the Daily Mail, quote, "The fact that they'd paid the men who stole me from my real parents means that there's a distance between us, but I don't want them to be punished, and I will look after and care for both of my families." Number 2. Sarah Finkelstein stared at the side of a milk carton that had the words "missing" in bold black letters. She looked in disbelief as the picture underneath was of her. In 1983, Sarah was just 13 years old when she discovered that she was a missing person. She lived her whole life believing that her father had brought her to the US from Norway, and that her mother wanted nothing to do with her. In fact, it was the complete opposite. Her mother had never stopped looking for her, and neither had the FBI and Interpol. Sarah was just 4 years old when she was taken by her father. He told her that the two were going on a day out, but instead they got onto a plane to the US and never looked back. According to Sarah, her childhood was anything but easy. Her father told her that her mother didn't want to come and live with them, and that he was constantly paranoid, moving them from town to town every few months. Back in Norway, Sarah's mother had filed a missing persons report, and Interpol and the FBI launched an investigation. Sarah's father knew that he was a wanted man, and as a result, they moved between 34 different states to avoid detection. Sarah told The Guardian that when she was 8 years old, her father cut her hair and told her to pretend to be a boy named Max. After finding out that she was a missing person, Sarah spent another 3 years with her father, trying to figure out what to do. And finally, when she was 16, she left for New Jersey. She had family in New Jersey that welcomed her with open arms and helped her track down her mother, telling The Guardian, quote, "I called her and said, 'Hello, this is your daughter.' There was a silence, and then she replied, 'Are you okay?' The pair met up, but found it difficult to bond. Despite this, the two are still in contact and involved in each other's lives, trying to repair the damaged relationship the best they can. As for Sarah's father, he is a free man. Neither Sarah nor her mother wanted to press charges against him, and he's now living in Jerusalem, going unpunished for his crimes. Number 1. 17-year-old Ori Steinman and a group of his friends were playing around on the internet in early 2003 when his friends suggested Googling his name since his name was so unusual, and they wanted to see what they could find. According to Rhonda Morgan of the Missing Children Society of Canada, he was just messing around because he has an unusual first name. Ori's joy soon turned to horror as the search loaded and brought back a result of a missing person. He clicked into the link to see a photo of himself as a toddler, accompanied by the word "missing." The webpage explained that Ori and his mother, Giselle, were last seen in Red Deer, Alberta, Canada before disappearing. In reality, Giselle had kidnapped Ori and moved to Los Angeles as she was in a fierce custody battle with Ori's father, Rodney. Ori was confused and felt that he was unable to confront his mother, so instead he told his teacher, who in turn alerted authorities. Los Angeles authorities confirmed the details and contacted the RCMP to launch a full investigation. The investigation found that his mother had first fled with Ori to Mexico before settling in Los Angeles, where she worked in administration for the Los Angeles Unified School District. The investigation also found that she'd only been granted weekend visits at the time of Ori's abduction. Unable to cope with the idea of losing custody of her son once and for all, she fled with Ori, hoping that authorities would never catch up with her. She managed to live a relatively normal life, getting married twice and getting a good job to help support her and her son. On February 11, 2004, Ori's mother was arrested by the US Marshals and taken into custody. Canadian authorities fought hard for her extradition, and in 2005 it was granted and she appeared before a Canadian court. In his closing statement, Judge David Ploss said, quote, "I find you did take the child in contravention of the court, and that you clearly showed intention to deprive the father of the child. I find you guilty as charged." Ori's mother was sentenced to just 2 months in prison, and after his mother's arrest, Ori went on to apply for US citizenship and attend college. Thank you guys so much for watching. If you liked this video, be sure to click that like button. Also, don't forget to subscribe and click that notification bell to keep up to date with all of our future uploads. But I've been Ty Knotts, and I'll catch you guys in the next video.